Hey, welcome back to the Leaders Seminary. I'm Dr. Mario Hood, and I want to say thank you for checking out part 2 of this video series. As always, if you haven't seen part 1, or if you just want to watch it again, check for the link of that video in the description below. Also, if you have any feedback or any questions, leave those in the comments below. Let's jump into part 2 right now.
I love that. That is spot on. And me and Dr. Tammy were in the same cohort, but we were also in the same advisory group. And so while she was looking at the church holistically, in my dissertation, I focused on a generation, which was Gen Z, and looked at them from a Western Pentecostal understanding of leadership. And a lot of our research overlapped. And one of the things that we both talked about from a different standpoint was the understanding that the church, while it is an organization, it's a different type of organization. And I can't remember. It's like Rase Tar. It's a German or French word, and my advisor would kill me right now because I don't know this off the top of my head. But basically, what it means is that while the body functions as an organization, it's more about growing the people. It's more about making sure that it is relational based and not outcome based. And that's what I love about this growth culture, because like you said, which I just learned something when it comes to farming, is that, you know, what you put in that culture grows. And so even if, you know, a lot of times when we encounter leaders, even outside of the church, it is informational driven. And what I hear you're saying is that information is good, but transformation happens in a different way. And exactly. you can hear something, you can Google something, and you can know something, but there's a difference between knowing something and living that something out. And so that's what I appreciate about what you have written about and what you're saying.
I took it, Mario, from insight to understanding to wisdom. So the three-pronged approach to growth, transformational development. And I took the bodies of work that I used were human development, leadership theories, the disciples with Jesus and the model that he used. So I took different disciplines to really look at how do people grow? How do people really change and transform? And what I discovered was you do have to have new knowledge, because your knowledge that you're gaining challenges your current mindset.
Wow.
That's what it really is. We all have mindsets. And if those are fixed, if you have a fixed mindset, so this is Carol Dweck's work on fixed versus a growth mindset. If you have a fixed mindset, you're not going to learn. You're not going to grow.
Yeah.
But if you have a growth mindset, you know that your current way of thinking needs to be challenged. All of us need our current way of thinking challenged. Yeah. We don't have it all right. So if we approach this with that, an openness, a growth mindset, we're going to get new knowledge. But if we're not in a relationship and an intentional relationship where we process that new knowledge with one another, like you and I are doing this right now.
Right.
So we both gained some new knowledge and we've processed it. That's what our group was about. We talked about it. That's where it moves from insight to understanding.
Right.
I actually take responsibility now for what I know, because you and I have talked about it. You've pressed back on it. I have on you. We've asked each other questions.
Right.
The other part, though, that's necessary is I have to go put it to practice. If what I've learned and processed with you has not been put into practice, I won't grow.
Right.
I won't change. So I go and I use the word reflective practice, because I don't just go do something. I do something with the idea of reflecting on it, because then I'm going to come back to my intentional relationship with you and talk about what did I learn about my new knowledge and whether it worked or not.
Right.
That's reflective practice. It's those combinations constantly working together of those three things that bring about transformation.
That's awesome. And, I am always looking at, like you said, different places when it comes to leadership. It's one of the biggest things that I learned. I think it was either in our master's or our doctoral program, was just this whole theory of leadership. And there's so many different concepts out there. And,
Yes.
not that one's right or one's wrong. That's why, we start the episode with, hey, what is your understanding of leadership? And you were speaking just now and it reminded me, I just found this new organizational behavior psychologist, Adam Grant, and he talks about there's three different ways that you can pursue learning. You can either be a scientist, you can either be a preacher, or you can be a prosecutor. And what he says is the preacher and the prosecutor are always either defending their way or trying to make you think the way they think. But a scientist is taking all of the data and challenging their assumptions that they come up with, because they know that the end of the journey is to try to learn and either prove what you thought is right or learn that you were wrong, but you learned something new. And
Right.
that's kind of how I hear you talking about, the different stages of learning, and how if we would take the time and what he says, like challenge your assumptions, then growth of your insights and intellect and wisdom, those things happen over time, but you can't come in with a fixed mindset, or you're never going to learn anything new because you're going to always think that you're right. And so
It's having a sense of discovery and wonder. I think that Jesus followers should be the most curious, wonder and awe people on the planet.
Yes.
Because we get that our Creator that we follow is constantly creating and making new things, and there's new things to discover. And when you have that mentality, it also walks hand in hand with humility.
Yeah.
Because a person who's constantly growing and know they need to grow and learn will keep a far more humble posture
Yes.
than one who thinks we have it all figured out.
Absolutely. And so that's great. You've given us so much wisdom. I'm going to name off your culture markers of the collective and your culture markers of the individual. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about the individual, but I want to name, because I just know there are people that are listening, they heard those and they're like, what are those? And they're, we encourage you, listen, in the link below this video, or if you're listening to this, you can go to the podcast episode and get the link for Dr. Tammy's dissertation, and I encourage you to read that. But so the 5 culture markers of the collective: number 1, it starts with a belief system. Number 2, it requires a committed community. I love that. Number 3, it is enculturated by clear and consistent communication. Number 4, it is supported by functional structures and systems. And number 5, it is reinforced by evaluation and response. You want to add anything to those real quick, or?
They're really important, and you can't skip one.
That's what
and they all work together all the time.
Yes, because I know our leadership brains were like, okay, let me focus on the one that I think is going to work the best. But
nope.
it's a whole without taking out. They're individuals, but the individuals make a whole. So you can't just pick your favorite one and try to run with it.
It's the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Okay. So in good culture, good ground for a seed to grow, there's certain nutrients within that soil or it doesn't grow. So there's sand and there's loam and there's clay, and the mixture of those things are what create the ground for the seed to have the best opportunity to become what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's what these are to the culture, the ground of your organization.
That's great. So those were the 5 markers of the collective, and then the cultural markers of the individual. And I love these, and I'll give you credit for sending me down this rabbit hole that I've been on lately when it comes to neurotheology. But culture marker number 1 is head, so mindset and knowledge. Culture marker number 2, heart, intentional relationships. And culture marker number 3, hand, reflective practices, which you've kind of talked about that a little bit. So say anything else about those 3 individual markers?
Well, the reason it's embedded within the 5 collective is for an organization, for a church, you have to build these 3 things into the life of your organization.
Yeah.
So that's where your functional structures and systems come into play. These have to be embedded within it. So if you talk about this, say, as a church, but you don't have a way for a system of community to be developed, or for practice to be developed, or for learning to be developed, then you're not going to have a growth culture.
Yeah.
So the organization has to hold these 3 spaces for individuals to find that. Now, they can find it outside your church, but if you want your organization to have a growth culture, then these have to be embedded within each other.
Absolutely. I love that. And again, so Tammy has sent me down this rabbit hole of neurotheology, and it's this understanding of learning how our brains function, and not just processing information, but the way our whole body is connected when we process that information, from feelings and emotions to just the way that we function as a whole. Because and I could be wrong, so correct me, Dr. Tammy, but it seems like for such a long time, especially, let's just pick on our spirit-filled family, that we only viewed emotions in one type of sphere. So it was either good when it happened in church because we, felt the presence of the Lord, or we had amazing emotional moments. And I'm not saying that in a degrading way. I love those moments. Or we've seen emotions just as bad, when it comes to maybe getting mad or angry or upset. But what I love that I've been learning from my studies in emotional intelligence, but especially in neurotheology, is the understanding of how God created us as emotional beings, how our brains process our emotions, and how being in face-to-face and relationship actually has been a missing part of the discipleship process in our churches.
A huge component, Mario. And, I've been really trying to remind people that when Jesus said the greatest command is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yeah.
The strength represents your body. The mind represents your brain, your thinking. He told us to love him with our all.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes, especially in the evangelical church, and maybe even more so in our Pentecostal charismatic traditions, we've had a tendency to treat the body as if it's the flesh.
Yeah.
And we're told to crucify the flesh. Well, the flesh and the body are 2 different things.
That's good.
We've been taught that our emotions often are bad.
Yeah.
And we're not to let them rule us. Well, we don't even accept them, let alone let them rule us.
Right.
And so we've made them bad. And the only thing good is the spirit. Mm-hmm. And I think that is pretty far off base from the wonderful human being that God created us to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to all remember that Jesus was as human as he was God. And I think we often spiritualize him to the point that we miss the importance of his humanity.
Yeah.
That being created in the image of God means our body, our minds, and our souls are holy things.
Absolutely.
It's the flesh and the devil that need to be transformed.
Right.
And that's what this whole process is about. But who we are in the image of God, body, mind, and spirit, is a beautiful thing.
Right.
And that's why I love Paul's blessing to the church in Thessalonica, that you may be kept blameless. Body, soul, and spirit until the day of Jesus Christ.
So good. Well, thank you so much for being
My pleasure.
with us on the Leaders Seminary. So we always start with a certain phrase, and then we end with a favorite quote. And so one of your favorite quotes was, "Leadership in Jesus's church is about being a first follower." I love that. I've used it. Tell me what that means to you, and what that means to all of us as leaders in the church, at home, at work, entrepreneurs, scientists, moms, dads. What does that mean for them?
Well, let me just put a shameless plug in here. This dissertation has an artifact, unlike yours, that you just did a whole lot of writing. I did an artifact, and it is going to come out in a book form that can actually be used in any organization. Yeah. Hoping to get that done within the next few months. Yeah. But for me, this picture of leadership, Mario, is that I'm concerned that the church growth movement has taught us as leaders that we really are the leader of the church. Mm. And I think Jesus alone is the leader and Lord of the church. Absolutely. All the rest of us are followers, and we're members in his body, and we serve according to the gifting that he gave us. And if he's given us the gift of leadership, then we do that as a first follower. In other words, Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Christ."
Right.
And so there are people who follow our lives because of that gift of leadership that God has given us. But the important piece is to remember he is the leader and Lord of the church. We are all first followers, and any leadership that we have that influences others is the overflow of Christ in us.
That's so good, and couldn't agree more. And that's where our theology and our leadership work together. Because when we understand that Christ is the head and that we're following him, then we can help lead other leaders and other people towards Christ, which is obviously something I believe in, and my dissertation talks about that from the Spirit-led perspective. And so I love that quote. That's a great way to end this episode. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to the book that's coming out, and would love to help promote that as well. So again, thank you, Dr. Tammy, for being with us, and make sure to check out the show notes.
Always great.
Make sure to check out the show notes, and maybe we'll do this again.
Always great to be with you, Mario. Dr. Mario. Love being on the journey with you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you could please leave a comment or a question about anything that you heard today, that would be acceptable, and we'll get to all of your comments and questions as fast as we can. So until next time, we'll see you on the Leaders Seminary, where we understand how theology and leadership work together. Peace.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Leaders Seminary, understanding how theology and leadership work together. If you've enjoyed this content, do me a favor, turn the like button blue, and maybe even subscribe to stay up to date with all of the content that's coming to this channel. And while you're at it, check out one of the other episodes that you see on the screen now, and I'll see you in the next one.